Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Easy English Spark. I'm so excited you're here today because we're diving into a brand new 10-chapter story that will power up your English listening and speaking skills. Over the next few videos, we'll journey from the figure in the underpass all the way through to choosing my own reflection, picking up key vocabulary, and natural conversation patterns along the way. This engaging tale is perfect for building your confidence and fluency, so let's get started and light up your English journey. Chapter 1. The Figure in the Underpass. Let me take you down a quiet city street in New York, where the everyday and the extraordinary collide. My name is Alex Morgan, and this is the story of the night I met myself. I was 34 and working as a data analyst in a small firm downtown. My routine was as predictable as clockwork: wake, commute, work, head home, and sleep. It wasn't a bad life. Steady pay, friendly coworkers, a tiny apartment I could call my own. But it felt empty, as if I were sleepwalking through my days. One Tuesday evening, I stayed late at the office finishing a report. By the time I stepped outside, the city lights had already switched on. Instead of taking the main avenue, I cut through an old pedestrian underpass beneath a railway bridge. It was a narrow tunnel lined with cracked tiles and flickering sodium lights. I'd used it dozens of times to shave off a few blocks on my way home. It was always quiet, almost too quiet, but I liked its solitude. That night, though, something was different. As I entered the underpass, the air felt colder, heavier. My footsteps echoed against the damp walls. Halfway through, I saw a figure up ahead, standing perfectly still beside the far wall. At first, I thought it was a statue, or someone waiting for a friend. As I drew nearer, my heart began to thud in my chest, a slow, uneasy rhythm. The man wore a dark trench coat turned up at the collar and a simple gray scarf looped around his neck. He was tall and slender, his stance rigid. What caught me off guard was his face. It was as if I were staring into a cracked mirror, seeing my own features etched in someone else. Same height, same build, same tidy dark hair falling just past his ears. I blinked and my vision wavered, but when I opened my eyes, he was still there, watching me. I slowed my pace until I was standing only a few feet away. My hand fumbled for my phone, ready to snap a photo or call someone. The stranger's face remained expressionless. No smile, no frown, just empty eyes, cold as steel. "Excuse me," I said, though my voice sounded small in the tunnel. He did not respond. He did not move. Instead, he lifted one gloved hand in a slow, deliberate wave. Or was it a warning? My pulse raced. Goosebumps prickled across my arms. Rationally, I knew this was impossible. He could not be me. Yet every instinct I had told me this was wrong in the deepest way. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he turned and melted into the darkness behind him. I watched his back recede, heard only the faint scrape of his shoes on concrete. One moment he was there, solid, breathing, and the next he had vanished into the night. I stood frozen for a long moment. My hands were trembling. I raised my phone, but the screen was blank. The camera refused to open. I forced myself to step forward and peer down the tunnel. Nothing. No sign of footprints, no flicker of movement, no echo of his departure. The tunnel stretched empty in both directions. Shaken, I scrambled out of the underpass and onto the street above. The night air felt sharp against my face. I looked back once, half expecting to see him standing on the curb behind me. But there was no one. Just the steady hum of traffic and a stray breeze rustling a discarded flyer on the sidewalk. I hurried home, chest tight and mind racing. Every shadow along the way seemed to hold a hidden figure. Every passing pedestrian stole glances I thought were meant for me. When I finally reached my apartment, I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. I forced myself to calm down, telling myself it had been a trick of the light, exhaustion, stress. I checked my watch. It had been only a minute or two in the underpass, but it felt like hours. That night, sleep evaded me. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the encounter in my mind. I ran my hand over my face, feeling the familiar curve of my jaw, the slope of my nose. Everything looked normal. Everything felt wrong. At 3:30 in the morning, I slipped out of bed, crossed the room, and stood before the mirror. My reflection looked back exactly as I remembered. The same tired eyes, the same straight hair, the same faint scar above my right eyebrow from a childhood accident. But beneath those surface details, I felt a hollowness, as if the stranger's emptiness had seeped into me. I pressed my palm against the glass and whispered into my own eyes, "Who are you?" Of course, there was no answer, only the soft buzz of the city in the distance. Yet I knew one thing for certain. I had seen something impossible. Someone who looked exactly like me, moving through my world, and now I could not unsee him. The days that followed, I would return to that underpass, seeking answers from its silent walls. But that belongs to Chapter 2. For now, remember my name, Alex Morgan, and know that some shortcuts lead you straight into your darkest questions. Chapter 2. Questions in the dark. I did not sleep that night. My mind raced with fragments of what I had seen. The pale face in the underpass, the hollow eyes, the final slow wave. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing there, perfectly, still, as if he belonged to that tunnel. By morning, I felt both exhausted and restless. I made coffee, black, no sugar, but my hands shook so badly I spilled half of it on the countertop. I stared out my apartment window at the street below, watching cars roll by. The ordinary world moved on without me. I put on my coat and decided I needed to know whether I was losing my mind or if something truly strange had happened. I walked to the subway station and rode one stop east to the entrance of the underpass. It was just after 9 o'clock. The tunnel was quiet, empty. The flickering lights hummed overhead. The tiles on the wall were stained with damp patches and old graffiti. At the spot where I'd first seen my double, there was only peeling, paint and a small puddle on the ground. I knelt to look for footprints or scuff marks, anything. But the concrete was clean. No trace of another person's shoes, no dirt dragged in, nothing. I pressed my palm flat against the wall, as if it might whisper secrets to me. My pulse throbbed in my wrist. I thought about taking out my phone to record video, but I hesitated. What if I captured nothing? What if I made a fool of myself? I slipped my phone back into my pocket. A sudden noise made me jump. It was the sound of a bicycle bell. A delivery courier, dressed in green and yellow, coasted past me without a glance. I called out, "Excuse me, did you see anyone standing here just now?" He shook his head, glanced at his phone, and rode on. No one else was around to ask. I climbed the stairs out of the underpass and found myself on a quiet side street. The sun was high enough now to cast strong shadows, but I still felt cold. I walked to a nearby bakery, hoping someone inside might remember something from last night. The baker, an older man in a flour-dusted apron, was sweeping the floor. Cleared my throat. "Sir, I know this is weird, but did you see anyone strange in the tunnel last night?" He paused, eyeing me curiously. "Last night?" I close the shop at 7. I lock the door and go home. Sorry, I didn't see a thing. Disappointed, I left and tried one more place. A small convenience store 2 blocks away. A young woman was stocking shelves. I asked her the same question. She shook her head. "No, I wasn't in this neighborhood yesterday evening." I walked back to my apartment feeling hollow. I wanted someone, anyone, to confirm what I'd seen. But no one had. It was as if I had dreamed the whole thing, then forced my brain to believe it was real. That afternoon, I tried to work from home. I opened my laptop and stared at the blank spreadsheet I was supposed to fill. numbers blurred on the screen. I forced myself to type a few lines, but my mind kept drifting back to that underpass. I kept thinking, what if it wasn't a hallucination? What if there really is a man who looks exactly like me walking around in the dark? By early evening, I could not stand it any longer. I texted my friend Karen. "Hey, you free? I need someone to talk to." Within minutes, she replied, "Sure. You okay?" I didn't answer right away. How could I explain? My brain felt tangled. Finally, I texted, "Can you come over? I'll tell you in person." Karen arrived at 8 o'clock, carrying a bottle of red wine and 2 mugs of hot tea. She is one of the few people I trust completely. We sat at my kitchen table. I poured tea for both of us and took a deep breath. "Karen, I know this sounds insane," I began, "but last night I saw someone in the underpass who looked exactly like me. Same face, same coat, same height. He just stared at me and then walked away." Karen's eyes widened. "You mean you saw your double?" I know it sounds crazy. I went back this morning and there was nothing. No one remembers seeing anyone. But I swear, Karen, I saw him. And it felt real. She reached across the table and touched my hand. "Okay, let's think this through. First, you're safe. You're here with me. Second, it could be stress or fatigue. You've been working late a lot." I shook my head. "I've done this. Walked dozens of times. Something was different last night. The air felt heavy, like something was waiting for me." Karen sighed, rubbed her temples. "I believe you think you saw something, but memories can lie. How about tomorrow we go together? We'll bring a camera, some lights, and check that underpass thoroughly." I nodded, relief and anxiety twisting inside me. "Thank you. I don't know what's happening, but I need to know." That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling again. The questions swirled. Was I losing my mind? Or was I on the brink of discovering something impossible? I closed my eyes and tried to will myself to rest, but the double's empty gaze haunted me. In the darkness, I whispered to myself, "I will find out the truth." And so my quest began, searching for answers in the shadows, confronting the fear that something unexplainable had crept into my life. In Chapter 3, I will follow the clue I found, a single word on a scrap of paper. That word would lead me deeper into a mystery I never imagined. Chapter 3. A Name on Crumpled Paper. The next morning, I woke to a restless mind and a stiff neck. Every muscle in my body ached from lying awake all night. But I had promised Karen we would return to the underpass together, and I intended to keep that promise. I met her at the subway entrance at 9. She arrived bundled in a dark coat and carrying a small tripod and flashlight. We exchanged nervous smiles. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded, swallowing hard. Together we descended into the narrow tunnel. The air felt cooler than before, damp against our skin. The flickering lights cast long shadows that danced across the cracked tiles. For a moment, I hesitated at the spot where I'd first seen my double. Graffiti scrawled the names of long-forgotten hobby bands. Dirty water pooled in corners. Karen set up her phone on the tripod and opened a flashlight app. "Let's record everything," she said. "Walk from the entrance to the exit, then we'll replay it frame by frame." I took a deep breath and began. My footsteps echoed. Karen followed closely, shining the light so we could inspect every detail. We made the full pass twice. On the recording, there was no one else, just the two of us, our breaths ragged and hearts pounding. I watched the footage back, pausing and slowing the frames. No sign of another figure. We stopped at my encounter point, the rough patch of wall a little less than halfway through the tunnel. I placed my hand on the chipped tile, feeling the cold hardness beneath my palm. "Nothing here," Karen said softly. "It's like he never existed," I whispered, voice hollow. We sat on the cold concrete for a moment. I stared down at my shoes, coated in a thin layer of dust. Then I remembered something I had tucked away in my pocket the night before, a crumpled scrap of paper I'd found near the tunnel entrance. I reached into my coat and unfolded it carefully. The paper was thin, yellowed by moisture, and covered in faint, smudged ink. On it was one clear word, written in hurried cursive, "Read." No other letters, no numbers, no context, just that single name. It felt like a clue, a lifeline thrown across a chasm of confusion. I held it up to the light, tracing each curve of the letters. "Read," I repeated, my voice echoing in the hollow underpass. "Who are you, Reed?" Karen looked at me with concern. "Do you remember picking this up?" she asked. I don't know when exactly," I admitted. "I think I saw it stuck in a crack near the entrance after I ran away. I grabbed it without thinking." She examined the paper. "It could be a surname, a first name, a company, but it feels personal." She tapped the paper gently. "It might be the key." I folded the paper again and slipped it into my pocket. We stood and retraced our steps back to the street. The morning sun felt bright and intrusive after the dim tunnel. We paused at a bench nearby, spilled coffee from our thermoses warming our hands. "Let's search for Reed," I said. "Try Reed, New York Underpass, read missing person, read accident. My thumb raced across the phone screen. Karen glanced. Over. We need to be systematic. Start with the obvious. Read missing New York, then refine. Over the next hour, we sat side by side scrolling through news articles, public records, and forums. I took notes in my notebook. Read, last name. Location, Subway Underpass, Lower East Side. Year unknown. The first few pages turned up dozens of people named Reed. Lawyers, teachers, musicians. Nothing that matched our cryptic clue. Then, on the third page, I spotted a small local news site. Photographer killed in hit and run on Canal Street, dated 2 years ago. The victim's name, Lucas Reed, age 34. My heart skipped. Lucas Reed. The same age I had been when I moved. Here, the same age as me now, and Canal Street was only a few blocks from my apartment. I tapped the link and read the short article. On January 14th, Lucas Reed was fatally struck by an unmarked vehicle while crossing the street late at night. No witnesses came forward. Reed was a freelance photographer, lived alone, and had no known close friends. His case remains unsolved. I looked up at Karen, voice barely a whisper. He lived here. He died here. Karen's eyes were solemn. What if Lucas Reed is the man you saw? The idea chilled me to the bone. But he's dead, I said. 2 years dead. How could he stand in that tunnel last night? I scrolled further down and found a single photograph of Lucas, a black and white portrait from a gallery opening. He wore a heavy coat and a beanie. The lines of his face were striking, high cheekbones, a defined jaw. I held the picture next to my own reflection in the phone screen. The resemblance was uncanny. I closed the article and pressed the back button. My mind spun. If that paper bore his name, why would it appear in that tunnel? And if I saw someone who looked like me, was it Lucas reaching out from beyond? Or was something else using our faces as a mask? Karen sat quietly beside me. What do you want to do? She asked at last. I clenched my fists. I have to know more about Lucas Reed. Who he was, where he lived, why his name was in that tunnel. I flipped my notebook open and scribbled, Research. Lucas Reed Archives. Visit location of accident. Check public library for news clippings. It's a start, I said. We follow Lucas's trail. Maybe he'll lead us to the answers. That afternoon, I sat at my desk in the local public library, surrounded by bound volumes of old newspapers. The smell of aging paper filled the air. I turned each page slowly, eyes scanning for Reed. And on the margin of one article, I found a single line drawn in red ink. Always alone at night. Underneath, someone had written in pencil, Remember him. My hand shook as I traced the words. I was standing on the brink of something unimaginable. The name on the crumpled paper was more than a clue. It was an invitation, and I was going to accept. Chapter 4: Haunted Origins. I spent the rest of that day gathering everything I could find about Lucas Reed. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, I had assembled a small dossier. Name: Lucas Reed. Age at death: 34. Occupation: freelance. Photographer. Date of accident: January 14th, 2 years ago. Location: Canal Street, just blocks from my apartment. But I knew I had to go deeper. Facts on a page aren't the same as living memories. They don't show you the small details that make a person real. So on the morning of Chapter 4, I set out to trace Lucas's footsteps. I started at the city archives, an old brick building with tall windows and a heavy wooden door. Inside, the room smelled of ink and dust. Rows of filing cabinets stretched along the walls, each drawer labeled by date and subject. I approached the clerk's desk, where a bespectacled woman looked up from her ledger. "Excuse me," I said, heart pounding. "I'm researching Lucas Reed. I'd like to see any newspaper clippings or public records about him." She typed my request into an ancient terminal. After a few moments, she slid a thin folder across the desk. I opened it carefully. Inside were photocopies of newspaper articles, a coroner's report, and 1 or 2 personal notes, handwritten, lines that someone must have clipped and kept. One note caught my eye. A review from a local art magazine. It described Lucas's exhibit at a small gallery near Lincoln Park. The author praised his eye for texture and light, called him a quiet observer of the city's hidden corners. I underlined the gallery's name, Silver Lens. Feeling a surge of purpose, I closed the folder and headed straight for the gallery, which lay 3 stops uptown. On the train ride, I stared through the window at gray rooftops and winter-bare trees, imagining Lucas moving in the opposite direction 2 years ago, lens in hand, searching for stories. The Silver Lens Gallery sat on a narrow street lined with cafes and boutique shops. A simple sign above the door read, "Silver Lens" in elegant script. Through the glass, I could see framed photographs on white walls. I pushed open the door, setting off a small bell. A young man with a neatly trimmed beard looked up from behind the counter. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm looking for information on Lucas Reed," I said. "He had an exhibit here a few years ago." The man's face softened. "Yeah, Lucas. He was a friend of mine. Beautiful work. Let me grab some files." He led me to a back room where old exhibition records were stored. I watched him leaf through binders labeled by year, 2022, 2021, 2020. Finally, he found a folder marked Jan-Feb 2023. He handed me 2 items, a brochure for Lucas's show and a small guest book, where visitors had signed their names and left comments. I thumbed through the brochure first. It showed full-page images of cracked sidewalk patterns, reflections in puddles, a single abandoned shoe on the subway tracks. Lucas's signature style, finding beauty in forgotten places. Under each photo, his captions were simple: concrete jungle, lost and found, silent tracks. Then I opened the guest book. Most signatures were illegible, but one entry stood out. Lucas, your work is hauntingly beautiful. You make us see the city in a new light. Thank you. Miriam Holt, curator Miriam Holt. I made a note of her name. She might remember more about Lucas as a person. I thanked the gallery assistant, tucked the materials into my backpack, and left. Outside, a light snowfall had begun. Tiny flakes drifted down, settling on my coat and eyelashes. Lucas had walked these streets, camera clicking, snow falling, unaware his life would end so soon. That afternoon, I visited Lincoln Park, where Lucas had lived. The apartment building had green trim and ivy creeping up the brick facade. A brass plaque beside the door read, Elmwood Terrace. My building was across the street from Elmwood Terrace. I had passed it many times without a second thought. Rang the buzzer for apartment 4A. The unit listed as Lucas's last address in the accident report. After a moment, an elderly woman's voice crackled over the intercom. Yes? Hello, ma'am. I'm Alex Morgan. I'm researching a friend who lived here, Lucas Reed. Could I ask you a few questions? There was silence. Then the voice replied, I knew Lucas. He lived here a couple of years. I'm Edith Barnes, apartment 4B next door. I'll come down. A few minutes later, Mrs. Barnes shuffled down the hallway in slippers. She was small, her white hair pulled back tightly. Her eyes were sharp, though. Mr. Reed, she began, was a quiet man, always coming home late, sometimes after midnight. He'd hurry inside, clutching his coat and camera. He never spoke much, but I'd see him at the mailbox in the mornings. I asked, did he ever say why he was out so late? She frowned. He said he was chasing stories, nighttime scenes of the city no one else saw. But he looked tired, like something was chasing him. A chill ran down my spine. Did you ever see him with anyone? Friends? Family? Mrs. Barnes shook her head. No, he was a lone wolf. But before he died, I saw him from my window, standing in the courtyard at 2 a.m., staring at the building. He had that same hollow look, like he was lost, I thanked her and climbed back to the street. The snowflakes kept falling. I looked up at the windows of Elmwood Terrace, imagining Lucas on a cold night, searching shadows. On my way home, I called Miriam Holt, the gallery curator. She agreed to meet me for coffee the next morning. Before I hung up, I asked, "Did Lucas ever mention his personal life? His family? His past?" Her answer echoed in my mind. He said only that he felt invisible, disconnected, but his photographs spoke louder than his words. That night, I sat at my desk, spreading out my notes. Lucas walked alone at night, searching. He lived 2 blocks from my apartment. Neighbors saw him restless, haunted. His art captured the city's hidden corners. I stared at a photograph of mine. On the wall, my own work from last year, dull landscapes of suburban parks. Next to it, Lucas's brochure, full of life. I felt a strange kinship, as if our lives were layered atop one another. As I turned off the lamp and slipped under the covers, I realized I was chasing more than a name on paper. I was chasing a story of a man who once walked these streets, whose life and death had become tangled with my own. The question pulsed in my mind. Why did Lucas Reed's fate echo into my life? And so, with the snow falling softly outside, I drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of silent cameras clicking in, empty tunnels waiting for the next chapter to unfold. Chapter 5: Fractured Memories. I woke in a cold sweat before dawn, heart pounding as if I'd run a marathon. My dream was too vivid to be called just a dream. I was back in the Underpass, but the tunnel was flooded with blinding light. I watched I watched Lucas stumble into the middle of Canal Street. Horns blared, tires screeched. He tried to run across but froze when a car barreled toward him. There was a flash of red, a cry, and then nothing but silence. I sat up and pressed my palms to my temples. That moment, seeing Lucas die, felt like a memory, not a dream. Yet I had never been there. How could I recall something I never lived? My chest tightened with panic. It felt as though a part of my mind had been locked away, only now to leak out in disturbing fragments. After a quick shower, I left my apartment and walked to a small private therapist's office on Green Street. My hands trembled as I waited in the muted blue reception area. The receptionist smiled kindly and called my name. I followed her down a narrow hallway into an office lined with books and soft light. Dr. Harper, a woman in her early 50s with gentle eyes, sat behind a desk piled with files. She gestured to a chair across from her. I sank into it, clutching my coat lapels. "I'm here because I'm scared," I began, my voice unsteady. "I keep having memories that aren't mine. Dreams, Flashbacks. I saw someone die last night. Someone who looks like me, but he's not me. Dr. Harper nodded slowly. You feel disconnected from your own memories. She slid a notepad toward me. Tell me what you remember as you experienced it. I closed my eyes and described the dream in detail, the bright light, Lucas's face twisted in fear, his futile sprint across the street. When I finished, I felt exposed, like I'd revealed a shameful secret. That sounds terrifying, she said softly. But it may not be fake. The mind sometimes hides traumatic events through repression. When those memories resurface, they can feel like foreign footage, vivid, intrusive, and disorienting. She paused, letting the words sink in. It's possible you witnessed Lucas's accident without conscious awareness, then blocked it out completely. I sat back, stunned. But I wasn't there. I moved into this city after he died. Sometimes the brain can absorb sensory information, sights, sounds, emotions, especially if you were in proximity. You said you moved in the same building where he lived? I nodded. Elmwood Terrace. Dr. Harper leaned forward. And you found a name, Lucas Reed, on a scrap of paper in the Underpass. It seems your mind is latching onto clues from that night 2 years ago, even if you were unconscious of them until now. I ran a shaky hand through my hair. I want to recover the truth. How do I unlock these memories without losing my mind? She offered a reassuring smile. We can use guided recall techniques, safe, controlled visualization, perhaps hypnosis if you're comfortable. But first, let's gather more external evidence. Talk to people who were actually there. Her words echoed as I left the office. I felt both relieved and terrified. If I truly had buried memories of Lucas's death, I needed to find someone who saw it happen and compare notes. On her recommendation, I contacted the taxi company that had driven me the night I moved to the city. I dialed the number printed on my emailed receipt, Metropolitan Cabs. A polite dispatcher answered. Hello, Metropolitan Cabs. How may I help you? I'm calling about a ride I took on January 14th, 2 years ago, I said. I have the died receipt here. I need to speak to the driver who dropped me off near Lincoln Park late at night. There was a pause then. One moment, please. After a few rings, a different voice came on the line. This is Jeff at Dispatch. Jeff. Hi, my name is Alex Morgan. I'm trying to reach the driver of trip number 2574 from January 14th, 2023. The driver's name was Carla Lopez. Oh, Carla, he said. She's still with us. I'll connect you. I held my breath until Carla's warm voice filled the line. Hello? Hi, Carla. I'm sorry to call out of the blue. This is Alex Morgan. I rode with you that night I moved into town. I'm researching an incident that happened shortly after you dropped me off. She sounded curious. Sure. What happened? After you left me at the corner of Elmwood and Maple, I heard a loud crash. A man was hit by a car right in front of me. I was shaken and didn't think much of it. The police came, but I left before they finished questioning me. There was a long silence. Then Carla's voice grew soft. I remember. He was a young guy. I thought he looked lost. I called 911, but when I got a closer look, he looked a lot like you. Striking resemblance. My heart pounded. You mean he looked like me? Yes, she said firmly. I called it in as a hit and run. The man never spoke words I could understand. And his eyes, they were empty, scared. Tears pricked my eyes. That man was Lucas Reed. Carla exhaled. Lucas Reed? Yes. That was his name. I remember because I felt guilty. Maybe I could have done more to help. I thanked her, promising to follow up if I had more questions. After I hung up, reality felt elastic, stretched by memories and coincidences I could barely comprehend. That evening, I sat at my desk with fresh determination. I opened my journal to a blank page and wrote, Hypnosis session with Dr. Harper compared dream details with Carla's account visit accident site again. Seek surveillance cameras. As I closed the journal, I realized that my fractured memories were not a curse, but a bridge to Lucas's final moments, and to understanding why his story had become my own. Tomorrow I would dive deeper into those memories, guided by evidence and compassion, ready to heal the rift between past and present. Chapter 6. Identity Unraveled. I woke to a peculiar emptiness that morning, as though part of me had vanished while I slept. The memories I'd been unearthing, the accident on Canal Street, the face of Lucas Reed staring up at me in my dream, seemed to belong to someone else. And yet, they felt unbearably real. I knew I was on the verge of something both terrifying and essential, understanding who I truly was. After breakfast, I gathered every official document I could find in my apartment. Driver's license, passport, lease agreement, utility bills. I spread them across my dining table, forming a neat collage of dates and signatures. They traced my life in this city back only 2 years. Nothing before that. My New York driver's license had been issued 6 months after I moved in. The lease on my apartment began on the same day I arrived, and the utility bills started a week later. There were no older records, no college diplomas, no bank statements, no medical forms. Nothing to prove I existed before that single January day. I picked up my driver's license and studied the photo. My expression looked confident, benign, a person comfortable in his own skin. But the printed issue date glared back at me. July 12th, 2 years ago. I ran my finger along the embossed numbers. Why was every document brand new? I had lived most of my adult life elsewhere, hadn't I? Where were those records? Panic fluttered in my chest. I opened my laptop and logged into my email. I scrolled back through old messages. The oldest email dated to January 13th, 2 years ago. Welcome to New York. From my bank. I clicked older again and again. My inbox emptied after that first message. No travel confirmations, no flight itineraries, no old subscriptions, no personal newsletters. It was as if my digital life began the moment I stepped off the cab near Lincoln Park. Next, I checked my social media accounts. My Facebook profile had just 3 friends: Karen, my therapist, Dr. Harper, and a coworker, Tom. My timeline had only posts from the last year. Photos of a coffee shop, check-ins at a minor conference, birthday greetings from people I barely remembered. Scrolling further back stopped abruptly at mid-2023. My pulse quickened. I shut my laptop. Something was deeply wrong. If these were the only traces of my existence, then who was Alex Morgan before January 14th? Had I deliberately wiped my past? Or had someone, or something, done it for me? I needed physical evidence. I grabbed my coat and headed out to find any shred of history that predated my move. My first stop was my old college campus, where I'd supposedly studied computer science in another state. I found the admissions office online, called, and recited my student ID number. The woman on the line typed for a moment, then said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan, but we have no record of you. Are you sure that number is correct?" My throat tightened. I checked the papers in my coat pocket, the laminated student ID someone had given me years ago. It looked authentic. Name, photo, date of birth, university seal. But on campus, it was useless. There was no Alex Morgan. Next, I drove to the suburban house where I'd supposedly lived before moving. The address led me to a neatly kept lawn and a "for sale" sign. My heart pounded as I rang the doorbell. A middle-aged woman answered, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Can I help you?" "My name is Alex Morgan," I said. "I used to live here, from 2018 to 2022. She blinked. "That can't be right. My family moved in 3 years ago. Before that, the house was empty for a while." Her words hit me like a cold wave. Empty. My childhood home. My pre-New York existence. I thanked her, backed away, and quietly left. The neighborhood streetlights blurred through tears I didn't want to acknowledge. Back in the car, I took a deep breath. I had run out of places to look. Everywhere I thought I'd been before, I found nothing. It was impossible. I couldn't be a newcomer with no past. And yet, my documents, my friends, my very sense of self had been wiped clean before that January morning. I returned to my apartment and paced the living room. Thoughts collided in my mind. Had Lucas's death and my arrival that night somehow overwritten my own identity? Was I some strange echo of him, his life repackaged as mine? Or was his story bleeding into mine because of an unfinished connection? I sank onto the couch and picked up Lucas's photo from my desk. His eyes, empty and pleading, seemed to ask the same question. Who are you? I held the picture beside my face in the mirror's reflection. The jawline, the cheekbones, the shape of the eyes, our similarities were too striking to be coincidence. But something in his gaze conveyed desperation. An unfinished business that my life had accidentally inherited. My phone buzzed. A text from Karen. Remember, you're not alone in this. Call me if you need to talk. I stared at her words, feeling both grateful and distant. She had no idea how deep this went. I needed answers, and not just from documents. I needed someone who knew Lucas's past intimately, his friends, his family, anyone who could tell me if my memories overlapped with his life. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Contact Lucas's gallery mentor, Miriam Holt. Search for Lucas's personal effects, camera gear, journals. Interview neighbors from Elmwood Terrace beyond Mrs. Barnes." A plan began to take shape. I would trace Lucas's world as methodically as my own, hoping to fill the void of my vanished past, and perhaps find clues to reclaim a sense of continuity. If my life had begun on the night he died, then understanding his life before death might illuminate my own before and after. That evening, I drove to Miriam Holt's art studio, tucked into a row of converted warehouses near the waterfront. The building's door was ajar, light spilling onto the cracked sidewalk. I knocked gently. After a moment, a woman in her 50s, stern but kind, opened the door. "Mr. Morgan," she said, scanning me with an artist's eye. "I wasn't expecting you. I need your help," I said. "I'm trying to understand Lucas Reed, who he was, and why his story has become part of mine." Her expression softened. "Come in. It's not the first time someone has wondered that." Inside, shelves of photo equipment and stacks of gallery catalogs lined the walls. She gestured to a worn sofa. "Tell me everything." As I began recounting my encounters, the underpass, the scrap of paper, the theft of my memories, Miriam listened intently. When I finished, she leaned back and exhaled slowly. Lucas always said he felt haunted, she began. He believed his life and someone else's were entwined. He didn't say whose, only that he was living two lives at once. At the time, I thought it poetic. Now, it sounds literal. My breath caught. Do you think he was right? Miriam met my gaze. I don't know, but I know he left behind something that might help you, a journal he kept during his last months. After he died, it was stored here for safekeeping. I've brought it out. She handed me a leather-bound notebook, edges worn, pages yellowed. My fingers trembled as I opened it. On the blank first page, in Lucas's neat handwriting, were two words. Find me. I swallowed. If I was to rediscover who I really was, I would first have to understand Lucas Reed, his fears, his dreams, and the life that preceded his final night. Only then could I attempt to stitch the fragments of my identity back together, or decide whether the man staring back at me in the mirror was truly Alex Morgan, or something else entirely. And so, with the notebook in hand, I embarked on a journey through Lucas's memories, hoping they would guide me back to my own. Chapter 7. The Hidden Room. I stood in front of Elmwood Terrace once more, the building's red bricks glowing softly in the late afternoon light. I had returned with permission this time. Miriam Holt had arranged it with the landlord, explaining my unusual connection to Lucas. A polite agent met me at the door, clipboard in hand, and led me up 3 flights of narrow stairs to apartment 4A. The door was the same pale blue I remembered, its paint chipped around the edges. I fitted the loaner key into the lock and turned it. The door swung open on a soft creak. The apartment was empty now. Dust motes floated in the sunbeams slanting through the windows, and the faint smell of old carpet and varnish filled the air. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing on the bare floor. The layout was familiar. A small entryway, a combined living and bedroom space, and a kitchenette to the right. This was Lucas's world, the place he inhabited for 2 restless years before his sudden death. Now it felt like a time capsule, waiting to be opened. I set my backpack down and took out the leather-bound journal Miriam had given me. The cover was worn, the spine creased from constant use. I flipped through to the last page I'd read, Find Me, and then closed it. It was time to find where Lucas might have hidden more of himself. I began in the kitchenette. The cabinets were empty, but one drawer still held a tarnished key ring with a single silver key. I pocketed it, wondering what lock it might open. Next, I examined the living area. The walls were bare except for a single nail where Lucas's photographs must once have hung. I swiped my fingers across the wall. Dust left a faint outline of a large frame. I pressed along the baseboard, listening for a hollow sound that might indicate a secret panel, but heard only solid wood. As I moved toward the far corner, my shoe caught on a slight ridge in the floor. I knelt down and ran my fingers along the seam between two floorboards. One board was looser than the rest. My pulse quickened. I pressed down firmly, and it popped up on a hinge. Beneath it lay a narrow crawl space, perhaps 8 inches deep and 3 feet long. I shone my flashlight into the darkness. Inside, I found a small metal box, heavy and cold to the touch. It was locked, but the silver key I'd found fit perfectly. I twisted it in the lock, and the lid popped open. Within the box were 3 items: a faded photograph of Lucas standing in a sunlit park, his arm around a woman I didn't recognize. She wore a floral dress and smiled warmly at the camera. A thin envelope sealed with red wax. The outside was inscribed with elegant handwriting, "For Maya." A battered Polaroid camera, its film slot empty but the body etched with Lucas's initials, Alar. My hands trembled as I lifted the photograph. The park looked familiar. I'd passed a similar one on my morning runs, but I couldn't place the woman. I turned the photo over and saw, in faint pencil, the date October 10th and the name Maya. This must be the Maya I'd read about in Lucas's earlier journal entries, his lost love. I slipped the photograph into my notebook and turned my attention to the envelope. Breaking the wax was easy. The seal cracked with a soft snap. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in half. The handwriting was the same neat script I'd seen in his journal. My dearest Maya, tonight, I found a room that felt like home. I carved your name on the wall so you'd know where to find me. If ever you wonder where I am, follow my words to the hidden place. All my love. Lucas. The words made my throat tighten. He had hidden this message knowing he might never see her again. He had carved her name on a wall, but where? I rose and shone my light around the room. My eyes caught a faint smudge on the wall next to the closet door. I approached and pressed my palm against it. The paint felt rougher there. I reached into my pocket and produced a small penknife. With careful strokes, I scraped away a thin layer of plaster. Behind it was a crude carving. Maya. Beneath the letters, I noticed a small metal hinge. My breath caught. I pressed the wall and a hidden door swung inward, revealing a recess about 2 feet deep. Inside that space was a single old photograph, album bound in leather, the same color and texture as Lucas's journal. I pulled the album from its hiding place and sank to the floor. The album was filled with Polaroid snapshots, moments I could almost feel. Lucas and Maya laughing on a park bench, autumn leaves swirling at their feet. Maya alone, standing in a sunlit gallery doorway, looking thoughtful. A nighttime city vista, lights reflected in puddles on wet pavement. Each image was more vivid than the last, capturing intimacy and loss. I paused on one final photo. Lucas, alone in that underpass. He held the same camera I now held in my hands. The flash illuminated his face, wide-eyed, as if pleading. I studied that image long enough to feel the man in it reach out to me, asking for help. I closed the album and leaned back against the wall, adrenaline fading into exhaustion. The hidden room, the carved name, the photograph of Maya, all of it pointed to a love story cut tragically short. Lucas had built this secret space to preserve his memories, to protect his connection to Maya after he was gone. Now those memories were mine to carry forward. I tucked the album under my arm and rose, brushing dust from my clothes. As I stepped back into the main room, I glanced once more at the closed panel. A whisper of gratitude seemed to echo through the empty apartment. Thank you for finding me, with the leather-bound journal in one hand and the photograph album in the other. I closed the apartment door behind me. I knew what I had to do next. Find Maya Hart and return these pieces of her story to her. Only then could Lucas's, and perhaps my own unfinished journey begin to heal. Chapter 8. Echoes of a Lost Love. I carried the leather photo album and Lucas's journal out into the cool afternoon air. My hands shook as I texted Maya Hart. Hello, Maya. This is Alex Morgan. I found something of Lucas's that belongs to you. Can we meet? Elm Street Cafe? Tomorrow at 4 p.m.? I hesitated before hitting send. My heart pounded. All day, I replayed our meeting in my mind, imagining her eyes as she flipped through those Polaroids. When my phone buzzed that evening, I nearly dropped it. Her reply was short and careful. PM, Elm Street Cafe. See you then. I arrived. Early the next day. Elm Street Cafe was a small corner shop with mismatched tables and a painted sign above the door. Inside, the smell of coffee and fresh pastries wrapped around me like a warm blanket. I chose a corner table against the window and set the album and journal in front of me, covering them with my coat until she arrived. At exactly 4 p.m., the door chimed and Maya stepped in. She looked older than the woman in the photograph, her hair streaked with silver at the temples, but her posture was the same. graceful, self-possessed. She scanned the room and saw me. For a moment, her eyes widened, and I thought she might turn and leave. Instead, she took a steady breath and walked over. I rose and offered my hand, though she did not take it. Instead, she nodded once, a faint smile ghosting across her lips. "Thank you for meeting me," I said softly. "I believe these belong to you." I lifted the photo album and journal from under my coat. Maya's breath caught as I set them on the table between us. She reached out with trembling fingers and opened the album. Her eyes moved from page to page, lingering on the image of Lucas standing in that underpass. She touched the worn Polaroid, then closed her eyes. I spoke in a quiet voice, careful not to startle her. "I found these in a hidden compartment in Lucas's apartment. He left clues, his camera, photos of you together, and a letter addressed to you." Maya looked up, tears glistening in her eyes. "I thought I'd lost everything when he disappeared." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I've missed him every day." I nodded. "I found his journal, too." I slid it across. "He wrote about you often. How you laughed together in the park, the plans you made. He carved your name on the wall so you'd know where to find him." She opened the journal to a page where his handwriting repeated her name in looping letters. Her hand hovered above the lines. "He never stopped searching for you," I said. "He believed you would come back." Maya's shoulders shook as she turned the pages. Each entry was more fractured, darker, as if Lucas's hope had turned to despair. I watched her face, lighting softly with memory. "He loved you," I said gently. "He wanted you to know he was here, even after he was gone." Maya closed the journal with a soft sigh. She brushed a tear from her cheek. "I didn't know how to look," she admitted. "I loved him, but I was afraid. I thought he'd left me. I never imagined he'd left messages for me to find." I took a breath. "When I first came across his things, I felt lost, like I was living the life he left behind. But bringing these back to you makes me feel connected in a way I can't fully explain." Maya reached across the table and touched my hand. The contact was brief, gentle, but it sent a warmth through me. "You've done something beautiful," she said. "He wanted you to find me, and you did." She closed the album and slid it toward me. "I can't keep his things forever," she said softly. "But I want to remember him properly. Would you help me curate an exhibit of his work? I want the world to see his photographs and know his story." My chest tightened with emotion. I'd be honored. We spent the next hour planning, choosing photographs, writing exhibition notes, selecting a date at the Silver Lens Gallery. As we talked, I watched Maya's face transform from grief to determination. Lucas's memory, once hidden away, began to live again through our collaboration. When the meeting ended, we stepped outside into the golden light of late afternoon. Maya paused on the sidewalk and turned to me. "Thank you, Alex," she said, "for bringing him back to me." I nodded, feeling the weight of our shared promise. As I walked away, the city streets felt different, warmer, alive with possibility. I realized that in reconnecting Lucas and Maya, I had found a piece of my own story, too. The power of memory, love, and the hope that even in loss, something beautiful can emerge. And so, with Lucas's legacy entrusted to Maya's care, my journey took a new turn. No longer just unraveling the past, I was now building a future, one framed by photographs, bound by words, and illuminated by the echoes of a lost love. Chapter 9. The Woman Who Remembered. I returned to Elm Street Cafe 2 days later, clutching Lucas's journal and the small photo album. The morning light streamed through the windows, turning the wooden tables golden. I found Maya already seated. In our corner booth, her coffee untouched and steam still rising from the cup. She looked up when I approached. Her eyes were clearer now, determined, as if she'd steeled herself for this meeting. I slid into the seat opposite and placed the journal and album between us. "Thank you for coming," I said quietly. Maya took a steadying breath. "I needed to see these again. I've been thinking about Lucas every hour since we last spoke." I nodded. "I wanted to ask more about him, about what you remember." I opened the journal to a marked page. His handwriting was neat but hurried. "I can't sleep. Every street feels empty without her. Maya, come back to me." Maya's fingers trembled as she traced the words. "He wrote that the night before. He vanished. He said he felt like he was living two lives, one in my memories and one alone in the city's shadows." I leaned forward. "Did you ever feel that? In your dreams? In your waking hours?" Maya's gaze drifted toward the window, as if searching for something beyond the cafe's glass. "Yes. After he disappeared, I dreamed of him every night. I saw him standing under streetlights or at the edge of crowded rooms, always just out of reach. Sometimes I heard his voice whispering my name. I pressed gently. What did he say?" She closed her eyes. "Just one word. Remember." Her voice was so soft I almost missed it. He said it over and over, as if he was leaving me a final instruction. My heart lurched. Remember what? She opened her eyes and met mine. That he existed, that he loved me, and that I had to keep his story alive. I turned the journal's pages carefully until I found a drawing he'd made, a simple map of the city with a route marked in red ink. It started at the gallery, wound through Lincoln Park, and ended in the Underpass, where I first saw my double. He drew this, I said. He wanted someone to follow his steps. Maya studied the map. This was our favorite path, she said. We would walk from the gallery, past the park benches, all the way to Canal Street. He would stop at the underpass and take photographs of the light filtering through the cracks in the tiles. I remembered my own visit there. I closed my eyes and saw it again. The broken tiles, the dust motes in the air, the faint hum of far-off trains. He loved those small moments, I said, the ones most people ignored. Maya nodded. He said beauty hides in the shadows, but sometimes shadows hold the worst sorrows too. She took a small sip of coffee and set the cup down. After he died, I avoided the underpass. It felt like stepping into his grief. I slid the photo album toward her. I found more Polaroids, images of you and Lucas on that same walk. I thought you might want them. She opened the album and paused on a photo of the two of them sitting on a green park bench, autumn leaves all around. In the background, a lone figure stood at the underpass entrance, obscured, half in shadow. I never noticed him in that shot, she whispered. I realized it was the same double I'd seen, the man in the tunnel who looked like me. He had appeared in Lucas's photograph 2 years ago. He was there for both of us, I said. He's part of this story. Maya closed the album and leaned back. I think he's the echo of Lucas's grief, the part of him that couldn't move on. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. And maybe he's the part of me that never let him go. I reached across the table and took her hand. We both carry him with us, I said softly. But we're not alone anymore. We have each other and his art. Maya offered a small, sad smile. I'd like to curate an installation of his work. Photos, journal entries, fragments of his hidden room. I want people to walk his path, feel what he felt, and remember him. I squeezed her hand. I'll help. Let's trace that red path on city walls. Let's bring his shadows into the light. She nodded, then paused. I have one more thing to tell you. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This was in my mailbox this morning. She handed it to me. I unfolded the paper. In spidery handwriting, a single sentence was written. You have one more night. Don't fail him again. My stomach twisted. What does that mean? Maya looked pained. I don't know, but his message was never finished. He always spoke of a final warning. A chill ran through me. I thought of the double in the underpass pointing at the ground. I thought of Lucas's last breath, gasping in the emergency room, and the nurse's note that he said my name before he died. It all pointed toward something unresolved. I folded the paper carefully and placed it on the table. We have to go back there, tomorrow night. We need to understand what Lucas wanted us to do. Maya nodded, steeling herself. Together. As we left the cafe and stepped into the fading daylight, I felt the weight of Lucas's echo lift, slightly. We were no longer just bearers of his grief. We were guardians of his final message. And in that moment, I understood what it meant to be remembered, and to remember in return. Tomorrow night, we would face his warning. And for the first time I felt ready. Chapter 10. Choosing my own reflection. That night I didn't sleep. My mind raced with fragments of Maya's final warning. You have one more night. Don't fail him again. The envelope's message felt like a gauntlet thrown at my feet. If Lucas's voice still lingered in the shadows, urging us on, I had to answer. I checked my watch. 10:00 p.m. The streets outside my apartment were hushed, broken only by distant sirens and the hum of neon signs. I slipped into my coat, tucked Lucas's journal and Maya's letter into my backpack, and pocketed my flashlight. As I closed the door behind me, I felt strangely calm, as if every step I took was guided by something larger than fear. I reached the underpass at exactly 10:45. The sodium lights flickered overhead, casting long, wavering shadows on the damp concrete. Graffiti mottled the walls, tags and slogans left by strangers, now silent witnesses to my journey. I paused at the entrance, heart hammering, and shone my flashlight into the tunnel. Every fiber of me wanted to turn back, but I stepped forward, determined. Halfway through, I saw him. The figure stood where Lucas once stood, the place Maya and I had marked on his map. He wore the same dark trench coat, the same gray scarf. His posture was rigid, hands at his sides. His face, the face, was indistinguishable from mine. I swallowed hard. I'm here, I called out softly, voice echoing. I'm listening. The figure remained still, silent. Then, after a breathless moment, he lifted one hand and pointed downward, toward the cracked tile at his feet. I crouched and shone, my flashlight on the ground. There lay an old cell phone, its screen cracked and dirty, but still glowing faintly in the dim light. I picked it up, wiping grime from the glass. A single image was displayed. A Polaroid shot of Lucas lying on the Pavement of Canal Street, blood pooling, eyes wide in shock. Beside him, half in shadow, was another face. My face. I pressed the power button. The date on the screen read January 14th, 2 years ago, 11:07 p.m. My breath caught. That was the exact moment Lucas died, and the exact moment I arrived, dropped, off by Carla's cab. It was as if our lives had shared the same heartbeat, intersected in a single, irreversible instant. The doppelganger's eyes met mine. For the first time, I sensed a flicker of emotion in those cold, empty irises. Something like hope. I pressed the phone's gallery icon and found one last video file. I tapped play. The footage was grainy, shot from the ground. I saw Lucas stumble into the street, turning his head as if searching for someone. He found the camera, suddenly aware of the lens pointed at him, and reached out. Then the car appeared, a blur of headlights. Lucas's hand shot up in a final silent plea. And at the very end, the image shifted. A flash of my own face in the shadow beside him, lips moving, my lips speaking a single word. Go. The screen went black. I heard my own voice echo in my mind. Go. The doppelganger blinked, then took a step toward me. My heart pounded in my chest. Was he Lucas's grief, demanding release? Or was he a fragment of myself, begging for forgiveness? I pressed the phone into my coat pocket and stood. The figure didn't move, only watched. I raised my hand and, in a steady voice, said, I choose my own reflection. The words felt both confession and vow. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Then, as I exhaled, the doppelganger's form shimmered like heat rising from pavement. His outline softened, the trench coat and scarf dissolving into pale light. Within seconds, he had vanished completely, leaving only darkness and the faint echo of a heartbeat in my chest. I stood alone in the underpass, flashlight trembling in my hand. The silence was profound, as if the world had held its breath. I shone the beam across the walls. No hidden doors, no lingering shadows, just the quiet tunnel, waiting for its next traveler. I stepped out into the night air, the cool breeze washing over me. I looked back once toward the underpass entrance, expecting to see the figure return. But there was only the legacy of what had been, Lucas's story, Maya's love, and my own choice to live authentically. On the walk home, I stopped by the small cemetery where Lucas was buried. The iron gate was open late, and the polished headstones glowed softly under the moon. I found his grave, a simple stone etched with his name and the dates of his life. I placed the cracked cell phone and journal at the base, along with a single white lily I'd picked up on the way. Thank you, I whispered. I choose to live for both of us. A breeze rustled the lily's petals. I felt a gentle warmth, as if Lucas's spirit nodded in approval. Satisfied, I turned and left the cemetery gate open behind me, a path for anyone who might follow. Back in my apartment, I unpacked the journal and phone. I sent Maya a single message. It's done. I have chosen. Her reply came almost instantly. I knew you would. I'll see you soon. I sat at my desk and opened Lucas's journal one final time. On the back cover, he had written in faded ink, "In choosing ourselves, we free the shadows." I closed the book and smiled. For the first time in 2 years, I felt whole. I was Alex Morgan, my own reflection, my own story, shaped by grief and love, but no longer defined by them. Tomorrow, I would wake, look in the mirror, and see myself. Not a ghost, not a shadow, but a man who had faced the darkness and chosen his own light. And that choice would guide every step I took from this night onward. Great work today. Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.